The rain had been falling since noon, a thin, silvery mist that blurred the skyline of Seattle into a watercolor of glass and smoke. By 6, when I parked near my parents' house on Lake Union, the streetlights were already trembling against the fog. Their glow bent through the wet air like distant memories. Inside, everything was exactly as it had always been, warm, symmetrical, and slightly too polished. The smell of roasted lamb and rosemary clung to the curtains. My mother's silver candlesticks reflected themselves in the dining table, multiplying the light until it became almost unbearable. Every Sunday, she called it family time. Every Sunday, it felt like a board meeting disguised as love. Clara, darling. Her voice. Practiced sweetness. A note too high to be genuine. She kissed my cheek, her perfume a sharp blend of lilac and something metallic like cold coins. My father didn't stand up. He never did. He just nodded, swirling his wine. Evan was already at the table, sleeves rolled up, charm effortless as always. He looked like someone who'd never had to prove his worth, the kind of man who moved through life certain that doors opened for him by design. He smiled. You made it. Thought you'd still be buried in spreadsheets. I smiled back. Deadlines don't take weekends off. Neither do you, he said, half joking, half true. Dinner began the way it always did, with the sound of forks against porcelain and the delicate choreography of polite silence. My mother spoke about the garden. My father corrected her facts. Evan laughed at both of them, and I sat there, nodding at the right intervals, feeling like an extra in a play I'd already memorized. Then, somewhere between the salad and the main course, my father said it. So, he began, still cutting his meat, we finalized the sale on the Lakeview apartment last week. I froze for a fraction of a second. The apartment? The one on 3rd Avenue. My mother added gently, as if softening the blow with her tone. It was time. The market's high right now. I put my fork down. You sold it? My father didn't look up. It made sense financially. We all agreed years ago that it was a family property. Evan poured himself more wine. Relax, Clara. You weren't even living there anymore. That's not the point, I said quietly. Then what is the point? My father asked, finally meeting my eyes. His were gray and steady, the kind of eyes that had learned to turn empathy into negotiation. It was mine, I said. I paid the mortgage every month. He sighed as though I were being sentimental. You know we helped you get that loan. We signed the paperwork too, remember? It's complicated. My mother placed her hand on the tablecloth, fingers perfectly manicured, nails a soft shell pink. Honey, don't make this into a drama. It's just real estate. Real estate. The word cracked like ice inside me. Outside, a gust of wind slapped against the window. The candle flames flickered, shrinking, stretching, trying to survive. Evan leaned back, grinning. Besides, Dad's right, and it's a great sale. You should thank him. I looked at him and saw it. The same smirk he'd worn since we were children, whenever he got away with something and I didn't. The same effortless immunity. I wanted to say something, to tear through the civility, but all that came out was a breath. Congratulations, I said finally, my voice level. I'm sure it'll look great in your portfolio. No one answered. Only the sound of knives, the dull rhythm of control. For the rest of the evening, conversation moved around me like water around a stone. They spoke about renovations, about Evan's new promotion, about my mother's charity work. The apartment had already vanished from the table, and from their conscience. But the smell of lamb stayed in the air, thick and sweet until it turned nauseating. When dinner ended, I stood by the window while they talked behind me. The rain had grown heavier. Across the water, the city's lights shimmered through the mist, blurred but still alive. For the first time, I wondered if that was how freedom began, quietly, invisibly, while everyone else kept eating. I bought the apartment when I was 28. Back then, it wasn't just a piece of property, it was air. It was space that belonged entirely to me, where every object had been chosen, not inherited. The building was old, a converted brick warehouse near Pike Place, with windows that framed the sound of the city. You could hear ferries from the bay in the morning, their horns slow and distant like some kind of heartbeat. At night, I used to leave the curtains open just to watch the reflections of headlights move across the ceiling. The first night I moved in, I didn't even have a bed. I slept on a pile of blankets and a single pillow, listening to the rain on the windows. There was a coffee mug, a desk lamp, and my laptop. That was it. Still, it felt full, not with things, but with permission. My parents had called it a phase. "You'll get tired of the city noise," my mother said. "One day you'll want something quieter, like Evan's place near the lake." I told her I liked the sound. She'd smiled in that way she does when she's already decided you're wrong. Evan came to visit once, just once. He walked around like a realtor, commenting on the view, the layout, the square footage. He'd said, "You could flip this in a year if you wanted to, make a decent profit." I told him I wasn't planning to sell. He smirked. "Then you're just wasting potential." That was always the language in our family. Potential, opportunity, return. Everything had to yield something. Even affection had conditions. You were loved if you produced results. You were tolerated if you didn't. I worked for a design firm downtown back then. Long hours, but I loved it. The symmetry of it, the clarity of lines and light. I saved every extra dollar, transferred it toward the mortgage every month, watched the balance shrink slowly. No one congratulated me, but I didn't need that. I just needed to know it was mine. That apartment saw everything. The exhaustion, the quiet victories, the mornings when I thought I couldn't keep going but did anyway. It saw me grow into someone they couldn't control. And maybe that's why they took it. The night after that dinner, I couldn't sleep. The walls of my rented place, smaller now, cheaper, more temporary, felt like they were closing in. I kept scrolling through my emails, looking for some sign, some official notice about the sale. But there was nothing. The documents had gone through weeks ago. All my signatures, the ones that mattered, had been replaced with my father's. He'd always handled the logistics, as he called them. I trusted him because he said, "Don't worry about it, sweetheart. I'll make sure everything's in your name." But it never really was it? Around 3 a.m., I opened the folder where I kept my old photos. There it was, the picture of me holding the keys, my first day there. I looked tired, happy. There was a bruise on my wrist from moving boxes, a paper cup of coffee balanced on a box beside me. I remember thinking, this is what freedom smells like, dust and paint and coffee. Now the same air felt heavy, thick with someone else's fingerprints. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't hurt, but because the pain was too clean, too clear. It wasn't shock anymore. It was recognition. They hadn't changed. I had. The next morning, my mother texted, "Dinner was lovely last night. Let's not dwell on the apartment, darling. You're doing so well in your career. Focus on that." I read it 3 times before replying, "Sure, Mom, I won't dwell." And for the first time, I didn't. I started documenting everything instead. Emails, account statements, loan records. Not because I planned to fight them, but because I needed to see it. The architecture of betrayal laid out like a floor plan. The first thing I did was open a spreadsheet. That's how I make sense of things. Columns, dates, precision. If I could translate the chaos into numbers, I could breathe again. At the top, I typed transactions, apartment. Below that, emails, transfers, signatures. The cursor blinked at me, patient and judgmental. I started scrolling through years of correspondence with my father, the documents I'd sent him when we refinanced, the bank statements he'd asked to review, the notarized papers I hadn't questioned. The pattern was subtle, almost elegant in its deceit. Tiny adjustments to shared accounts. His name shifting upward in the line of ownership. Mine gradually fading downward. He'd done it in stages, probably over months. And I hadn't noticed, because I trusted him, because I wanted to believe that family was supposed to mean safety. By the second night, I had folders labeled proof, call logs, a mortgage, and Evan. Evan's name didn't belong there, not legally, but I knew he had something to do with it. He always did. I found an email thread from 6 months ago, one I'd forgotten. My father had forwarded an appraisal document to me for review. Evan was CC'd. I remember thinking it was odd, but I'd ignored it. The subject line read, "Potential transfer discussion." Now I opened it again. The signature at the bottom wasn't mine. It was close but not exact, like someone had practiced. Evan's fiancée worked at a law firm. She probably knew exactly what to do. Memory is cruel in how it arranges itself. It doesn't come back chronologically, it comes back like shards, reflections, fragments, sudden cuts. I remembered being 15, standing in the garage while my father taught Evan how to drive. I was the one who had saved up for the used car, but they said Evan needed the practice more. He scraped the side door on the mailbox the first week. Dad laughed, said, "It's just metal." When I dented a bike once, he'd made me pay for the repair. Later, at 21, I lent Evan money for a tuition. He never paid me back. At 25, I helped my mother plan his engagement party, even though I was in the middle of a project deadline. At 28, I co-signed their loan for credit history reasons. And now, at 31, they'd taken my home. It wasn't a crime to them. It was just how family works. 3 days later, my father called. "Clara, sweetheart, I hear you've been upset." "I'm not upset," I said. "I'm just catching up on paperwork." He laughed softly, the way someone does when they want to make you feel small. "You've always been so thorough. That's what I admire about you, but this is unnecessary. Evan's name is just on there for convenience. It's still our apartment." "Our?" "The family's, yes. You know we've always helped each other. Except when I need help." Silence. Then that sigh, the one I knew since childhood, meaning you're disappointing me again. "You're making this about yourself, Clara. That's not healthy." "It's my name on the mortgage." It was, yes, but you wouldn't even have qualified without my backing. He said it so smoothly, so rationally, that for a second I almost agreed. That's how it worked. Always rewriting history just enough to make me doubt my own memory. But this time, I didn't back down. "I'll be reviewing everything with a lawyer." There was a pause long enough to hear him inhale. "A lawyer?" "Yes. You'd really go that far against your own family?" I thought about it for a long moment before answering. "No, Dad. I'm finally going that far for myself." That night, I opened every light in my apartment, the new one, small but clean. The air smelled faintly of detergent and pine. I sat on the floor with the documents spread around me. It didn't look like a crime scene. It looked like clarity. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for wanting what was mine. There was a strange calmness in the decision. Not to argue, not to explain, but to document, protect, and act. I wasn't planning revenge. I was drawing boundaries. And boundaries, I was starting to realize, are just quiet forms of justice. When people talk about taking back power, they often imagine confrontation, voices raised, doors slammed, dramatic exits. Mine didn't look like that. Mine started with an email. Subject line, property inquiry, legal clarification. Recipient, Harper & Lowe, attorneys at law. I'd met Julia Harper once before at a design conference. She was calm, methodical, and carried the kind of silence that made people nervous. I liked that. I wrote to her late at night, explaining the situation in the plainest possible terms. No emotion, no accusations, just facts, attachments, and a question. "Could you confirm who currently holds title ownership of the following property?" Her reply arrived the next morning at 7:46 a.m. "Ms. Dalton, thank you for reaching out. I'll begin the review today. Please do not inform any parties involved until I contact you. J.H." That single line steadied me more than anything my family had ever said. Over the next week, Julia and I exchanged dozens of emails. She traced the paper trail like a forensic artist. Contracts, amendments, signatures, witness statements. Every inconsistency she found felt like a small pulse of vindication. There it was, in digital ink. My father had authorized a temporary custodial transfer 6 months earlier. No expiration date, no consultation with me. Filed under the guise of a joint estate optimization. I almost laughed. Even their fraud came gift-wrapped in euphemism. "What does that mean?" I asked Julia. "It means," she said, "they wanted you to notice too late." At work, no one knew what was happening. I still presented to clients, still adjusted renderings of facades and skylines. But every time I drafted a floor plan, I thought about foundations, how you can't build on something that's already cracked. Evenings were quieter now. I stopped checking my family group chat. The silence there was its own kind of relief. I replaced my father's contact photo with a blank gray icon, my mother's with a seashell, Evan's with nothing at all. Julia called one evening, her tone neutral but edged with quiet satisfaction. We've confirmed the sequence. It's reversible, but you'll need to act first before they move any further assets. What does that involve? Filing a reversion claim. It restores legal ownership to your name. They won't be able to contest it once the documentation is processed. Will they know immediately? Yes, the filing becomes public record. I hesitated, tracing the rim of my glass with my thumb. Then I suppose they'll find out the way I did, through paperwork. She paused. Are you sure you want to proceed? I'm not sure, I said honestly, but I'm tired of being unsure. I spent that night filling out forms. The language was sterile. Transferor, transferee, property identification number, date of execution. But beneath the legal jargon, it felt like reclaiming oxygen. When I signed the last page, I didn't cry. I thought I would, but instead, there was a strange, steady pulse in my chest. Not joy exactly, not anger either. It felt like alignment, as if the ground under me had finally stopped shifting. 2 days later, I received the confirmation email. Filing accepted, title reversion complete. It was done. There was no fanfare, no cinematic score, just an automated message and my reflection in the laptop screen, tired, calm, resolute. I poured myself coffee and stood by the window. Outside, the city was washed in late afternoon light, gold-hitting glass, sharp and clean. For once, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Let them call. Let them wonder. Let them rage quietly in rooms I no longer had to enter. I had acted, and that was enough. That night, Julia called again. They'll likely reach out soon, she said. Be ready for emotional appeals, guilt, confusion, the usual. I know the pattern, I said. I've lived it my whole life. Then you already know the remedy. Silence? Boundaries, she corrected. Silence with purpose. I smiled. That's close enough. When my phone buzzed the next day with my mother's name, I let it ring. Then again. Finally, a text appeared. We need to talk. It's about the apartment. Don't do anything rash. We can fix this as a family. I stared at it for a long time before typing my reply. It's already fixed. Then I turned my phone face down on the table, poured more coffee, and opened a new document titled Blueprints for a New Beginning. Because that's what it was, a quiet, deliberate reconstruction. This time, I'd built something no one else could claim. It was almost poetic, the way the dinner invitation arrived. Printed on cream cardstock, embossed with gold lettering, the same stationery my mother used for holidays and birthdays, as if good taste could disguise bad intentions. Family dinner, Sunday, 7 p.m., you're welcome to bring dessert. No apology, no mention of the apartment, just an invitation wrapped in ritual pretending that nothing had happened. I RSVP'd with a single word I confirmed. When I arrived, the house looked the same. The manicured hedges, the heavy oak door, the faint scent of lemon polish in the hallway. But something had shifted. Or maybe I had. My footsteps didn't echo the same way. The air didn't feel thick with permission. They were already seated at the table when I walked in. My mother at the head, my father across from her, and Evan in his usual place beside the window. The good dishes were out. Crystal glasses, the silverware I'd bought them last Christmas. Everything glittered under the chandelier. Too bright, too deliberate. Clara, my mother said, her smile a little too wide, you look different. I am, I said simply, taking my seat. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the quiet clink of utensils against porcelain. Then my father cleared his throat, that performative gesture of authority he'd perfected over decades. We've been discussing the situation, he began. I let him continue. We think there's been a misunderstanding. Things got complicated. Legal language can be confusing. Evan added, You didn't have to go that far, Clara. It made us look, well, dramatic. Did it? I asked, tilting my head. I thought it looked precise. My mother sighed. Honey, you've always overreacted to... Boundaries? I interrupted softly. Yes, I've been told that. The silence that followed was surgical. I let it linger, slicing the air between us. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder, the same kind they had once used to advise me about financial decisions. I placed it on the table and slid it forward. These are the finalized documents, I said. The apartment title is under my name again. The utilities, insurance, and property tax accounts have all been updated. It's done. My father's jaw tightened. You could have talked to us first. I did, I said evenly. For years. You just called it complaining. Evan shifted in his chair. We're family. We share things. Sharing implies consent, I said. What you did was assumption. The air grew heavier. My mother reached for her glass of wine, hands trembling just slightly. Clara, this isn't like you, she whispered. I smiled faintly. It's exactly like me. You just never noticed because it didn't serve you. My father leaned back, studying me. So that's it? You get what you want and you just walk away? No, I said. I get what's mine, and then I stop explaining why I deserve it. He exhaled, frustrated. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, standing up, but it's mine to make. I gathered my coat, my movements deliberate. They watched me, all three of them, as if I were a stranger breaking script. And maybe I was. Maybe I'd finally stopped playing the role they wrote for me. Before leaving, I turned back and said, You know, for a long time I thought peace was something you had to earn. Turns out it's something you have to protect. Then I opened the door and stepped outside. The night air was cool, the city lights shimmered in the distance, steady and unbothered. I walked slowly without looking back. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Another text from Evan. You really think this makes you better than us? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. There was no triumph in it, no gloating, just a clean, quiet stillness. The kind that follows a storm when everything fragile has already fallen away. Later, in my own apartment, mine indisputably now, I brewed tea and sat by the window. The city below hummed with anonymous lives, each one its own story of survival and choice. I thought of all the years I'd mistaken compliance for love. All the times I'd been told that being good meant being small. Not anymore. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. Freedom isn't being understood. It's not needing to be. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and let the quiet stay. 6 months later, the city had changed colors again. Spring had unfolded into a softer kind of brightness, one that didn't demand attention, just offered light. From my balcony, the air smelled of wet concrete and magnolia. Somewhere below, a street musician played a trembling version of Moon River. It drifted up through the open window, fragile and slow, like something remembering itself. Inside, the apartment had become my own rhythm. White walls, pale oak floors, books arranged not by author or genre, but by how they made me feel. There were fewer things now. Fewer reminders. More space between objects. It felt like breathing. Most mornings, I worked from the long table near the window, the same table my father once called too big for one person. But I liked the emptiness of it. It reminded me that silence could be generous. Emails came and went. Calls were scheduled, projects approved. My professional life, the one they'd never fully seen, had blossomed in their absence. Clients who respected boundaries, colleagues who valued clarity. It was strange how confidence grew when you stopped apologizing for it. One afternoon, my phone rang, a number I hadn't saved but still recognized. I let it buzz twice before answering. Hi, Mom, I said. A pause, then her voice, careful, almost polite. Clara, I didn't want to bother you. You're not, I said, though the old reflex of tension pressed briefly against my chest. I just wanted to tell you. She trailed off, and I heard her take a breath. Your father's retiring next month. We're having a small dinner. Only family, if you'd like to come. The phrasing had changed, if you'd like to. Not an obligation, not a guilt script. A choice. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I'll think about it, I said. That's all I wanted, she replied softly. Just think about it. After the call, I sat for a while in the stillness of the room. It was curious how forgiveness didn't always arrive as a gesture, but as a lack of bitterness. There was no need to prove anything anymore, no need to win. Later that evening, I watered the plants, small, resilient things I'd bought the week I signed the apartment papers. They had outgrown their pots since then, stretching toward the window, stubbornly alive. I thought about repotting them soon, giving them more space. Before bed, I walked through each room slowly, the quiet rooms that no longer echoed with someone else's expectations. On the wall above my desk hung a single framed photograph, The view from my balcony taken on the morning I reclaimed the apartment. The sky had been gray then, uncertain, but there was light pushing through. I turned off the lamp, leaving only the faint glow of the city outside. Somewhere below, laughter spilled from a bar, a siren wailed and faded. Life went on, imperfect, uncurated, free. I stood by the window one last time, tracing the shape of my reflection in the glass. The woman who looked back wasn't hardened, just clear. Not angry, not vindictive, simply done explaining. For years I had believed that peace came after justice. Now I knew the truth. Peace was justice when chosen for yourself. I whispered it to the night like a promise I could finally keep. Kindness without limits isn't love. It's surrender. And I don't surrender anymore. Then I closed the curtains and let the quiet hold me not as a void but as a home.